Okay, hello, book club. Welcome. We see people are still trickling in, and we're so excited to welcome you to our first introductory meeting. So, this kickoff is just really a primer for the journey ahead. And we're so excited that you could join us. We had an overwhelming response. There are more than 1,300 people that signed up for book club. And originally, Leslie and I thought, oh, we'll have this really fun, cozy little discussion book club. And we're just overwhelmed and so excited. There are people joining us from New Zealand, El Salvador, China. So alumni all over the world, and some people will be doing asynchronous book club. I encourage folks, even if you're, 5:30 commute home and you just want to call in and listen to book club, you're welcome to do that or join us here on Zoom. Every meeting. So thank you so much. I'm just going to do a couple of updates and FAQs, and then I'll be joining you as a participant in this club, and our wonderful host, Cecily, will take it away. So my name is Sarah Fullerton. I'm the Director of Communications for the Arts and Humanities at Berkeley. And I just want to go over a few questions that we've gotten. Many folks have asked about the translation that we're using, and I just want to clarify, we are reading Daniel Mendelssohn's new 2025 translation. However, we're really diving into the story, so any version is fine. If there's a discussion about the translation itself, you'll have a faculty member walking you through it. Or Cecily, I know tonight is going to discuss a little bit about the translation. So any questions around that, there won't be a problem if you're reading another translation. There are audio and digital versions of Daniel Mendelssohn's. I had linked a lecture that he had done for the Library of Congress, and he's got a wonderful voice. So I actually think I might try the audio out as well. So regarding our schedule, just a quick update is that we are still working on changing that April date so that we can avoid that Passover holiday. We have plenty of time. We'll communicate with you and let you know when that gets rescheduled. Okay. But that will be rescheduled. So just letting everyone know. Recordings will be posted 2 business days, most likely the Monday following the book club. Um, and that will be on our YouTube channel, Slack, and Facebook. We'll also include the recording from the last book club meeting in the next email, but that might be a couple weeks after the meeting, right? So if you want to be notified, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and it will ping you and let you know when that video gets posted. So a note, while meetings are recorded, you and the breakout rooms are not being recorded, okay? So we want to encourage community and social connection, and we really encourage you to get on Slack, on Facebook, and ask questions, talk to each other. And so uh, let's see, what did I want to say as well? Yeah, it's connect with other people in different time zones. That's what I wanted to mention is that on the Slack channel, we do have different sections in time zones. Maybe you can connect with each other. So, all right, before I hand things off and introduce our host, I just want to acknowledge my wonderful colleagues who helped bring this together, Renee, Lily, our CDO, Karen, and most especially Professor Leslie Kirk in the Department of Ancient Greek and Roman Studies. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our host who's going to lead us through this wonderful journey, Cecily Manson. She's a PhD candidate in the Department of Ancient Greek and Roman Studies at Berkeley. She received her undergraduate degree in classics here at Berkeley. Um, and after graduating, she completed her master's at the University of Cambridge and returned to Berkeley in 2018 to begin her doctoral study. Her research focuses on Greek poetry of the Archaic period, and she's looking at different narratives around how ancient Greeks understood gender and divinity. So, without further ado, I'm going to let her take it away, and me and my colleagues will be answering any questions in chat and also directing Cecily questions as the evening goes on. So, thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I just have to echo Sarah really quickly and say how wonderful it is to see so many people here from so many different places who are excited about reading the Odyssey. I'm really excited to be here tonight and to have the opportunity to kick off the series of discussions that we'll be having together with UC Berkeley faculty over the next several weeks. To prepare us for those discussions, I'd like now just to briefly provide an overview of the poem, touch on some key themes and resonances that we're going to delve deeper into over the next several weeks. I'll try not to put in too many spoilers, so those of you first-time readers can still have a fresh experience. But first, the Odyssey. This is a poem. It was composed in probably the late 8th century or the early 7th century BCE, and it was an oral poem. So that means that in origin, it developed as part of a tradition in which bards, traveling bards, known as rhapsodes, would go around and compose the poem in real time for audiences. This meant that each occasion of performance was fresh and new. They drew on their knowledge of stock phrases and type scenes, as well as their meter, dactylic hexameter, to riff off of and expand these concepts and create creative and spontaneous performances of the poem. The question about how Homer is involved in this and when exactly writing technologies intersected with this oral tradition to give us the fixed poem we have today. This is very murky, but what we can say is that we're very lucky to have the fixed text we do, and that it gives us the opportunity to connect over it. I also mentioned the oral history of this poem as a reminder that reading aloud really is an option. And so if you'd like, you might find that it enriches your experience to read your translation aloud to yourself or find a buddy, maybe even in this group, that you want to practice reading together with. On to the plot. So if you're here, you might already have a sense of what the Odyssey is about. Maybe you've read it before. But in short, the Odyssey is the story of the hero Odysseus, a warrior and a king of the island Ithaca, and his return home after the Trojan War. Before I go further, I'm just going to pause and take us back for a brief summary of the story of the Trojan War. And this is mainly because some of the main figures of this story might show up in the first few books of our poem. You might know this story from the Iliad, where it tells just a very, very small amount of this war. But as the story goes, the war started when the Trojan prince Paris kidnaps or maybe elopes with Helen, the wife of the king of Sparta, Menelaus. Menelaus is furious. He gathers up troops from all over, sails to Troy, and they besiege the city nonstop, trying to get Helen back. 10 long years of war ensue, and the Iliad attests to the brutality of this. Full books are dedicated to images of slaughter and grief, and in particular, this seems to be the sort of war that even the children of gods, and sometimes gods themselves, are not invulnerable to. This war comes to a close with the sack of Troy, and we'll see that Odysseus plays actually a crucial role in this. And men pack up and set sail for home. This means that at the moment when the Odyssey begins, Odysseus has been gone for about 20 years. He's had these 10 long years of painful war and nearly another 10 wandering home, blown about. Pretty much any boat he gets on is torn to shreds. He winds up washed up on different shores of different communities, each with their own set of customs. Meanwhile, back home in Ithaca, a pack of suitors have infiltrated his home. This group of young men sit in his palace, trying to woo his wife, who they think of as a widow. Her name is Penelope. They're plotting to kill his son, who was a baby when Odysseus left and now is approaching adulthood. And perhaps most notably, they're constantly eating. They're feasting on his bread, they're drinking his wine, and continuously slaughtering and roasting hogs for sumptuous feasts. The poem, then, as we have it, is deeply concerned with and situated within the aftermath and the after period of this Trojan War. It's concerned both with the story of the one who goes to war and comes back, and with those who get left behind at home. It's thus a poem about the violence of war and the fear that that violence might come back into the domestic space. It's about the rift in social relationships as well as their repair. It's about loss and about reunion. It's about travel and the knowledge, risk, and reward that can come from being far from home. But it is equally about what it means to stay put and to watch your property. It's about dowry and inheritance. It's about disguise and recognition and claiming one's identity, and about the social bonds and family lines that make that possible. It's about growing up and getting older and the weird quality of time and our attempts to try and control it. It's about craft. And within and intermingled with all of these themes, this is also a story about stories and about the dazzling and arresting effect of storytelling. And so the narrative itself, as I'll show you very quickly, is also structured in such a way to highlight the various perspectives of the rift that the war caused and the theme of return. And so the first half of the poem, books 1 through 12, is split. Books 1 through 4, which we'll discuss with Professor Kurke next time, focus on life back home, on Ithaca, Odysseus's son Telemachus, and his wife Penelope, while books 5 through 12 focus on Odysseus and his travels. And note that 9 through 12 are narrated almost entirely by Odysseus. The second half of the poem, books 13 through 24, these narrative lines converge as Odysseus sets foot once again on Ithaca. The fact that the second half of the poem is consumed with the return is evidence that return in this poem is not just a spatial issue. It doesn't stop the moment the hero returns to his land. This structure also means that we are provided with a mirror with which to examine Ithaca and the space to which Odysseus returns. For instance, Odysseus, and as we'll soon learn, Telemachus too, travel all around in the first half of the poem. You might consider how the communities that they come upon treat time and gender and work, and how that compares to what you see on Ithaca. And you might also be on the lookout for how Odysseus is received as a stranger. What does he eat? Where does he sleep? And are there gifts involved? Notice too how Odysseus's presence affects each community he enters, and crucially, in the case of Ithaca, the place that he re-enters. So, to close out our discussion for today, I thought we could just begin to look at the poem together. So you'll be reading books 1 through 4, for next time. But I thought that we could look very briefly at the proem together. And the proem is what we call the introductory lines of the epic. And these lines, and especially the first word of a poem, are often thought to be miniatures of the thematic and narrative preoccupations of the poem as a whole. So we'll keep that in mind as we read. And again, this is Daniel Mendelssohn's 2025 translation we'll be reading. Tell me the tale of a man, muse, who had so many roundabout ways to wander, driven off course after sacking Troy's hallowed keep. Many peoples whose cities he saw and whose ways of thinking he learned. Many the toils he suffered at sea, anguish in his heart, as he struggled to safeguard his life and the homecoming of his companions. But he did not save his companions even so, though he longed to, for their heedlessness destroyed them, theirs and nobody else's, fools that they were, like children who devoured the sun god Hyperion's cattle. And so he took from them the day of their homecoming. Goddess, start where you will, daughter of Zeus, share the tale with us too. As I mentioned, the first word of the poem is important. So here we have the version of this translation, and I've inserted in a few places some key Greek words for this poem. So the first word of the poem in Greek is andra, man, or a man. And this word opens up a whole realm of associations that we can play with to think about our hero that we'll be following for the next several weeks. Because andra is both man, as in human, as in not God, and andra is also man, gendered, as opposed to woman, or andra is man as adult male rather than boy, child. And all of these tacit oppositions that are inherent in this first word end up becoming really productive pairings throughout the story. As Odysseus achieves his return together with his wife, his son, and among actually quite a few goddesses, specifically the goddess Athena. But the word andra also takes the place of a name we might expect to see. Notice that nowhere in these first lines do we get the name Odysseus. Rather, our introduction to the poem and to the man is shrouded in a certain sense of anonymity. Odysseus, however, becomes even clearer to us without his name, because throughout the Odyssey, he takes on disguises, and deception is how he gets his way. It is, in fact, a distinct characteristic of Odysseus to appear at first unassuming, only to reveal his true strength at the most decisive moment. This quality of Odysseus and his distinct presence in this poem, albeit unnamed, is actually even clearer when we consider one of the most difficult to translate or most variously translated words. You might find that your translation handles it very differently. This word polutropon, which Mendelssohn translates a man who had so many roundabout ways to wander. Polutropon is from the word polutropos. It's a compound adjective from polus, much, many, and tropos, turn, literally much turning. And Mendelssohn's translation makes clear that he's picking up the ambiguity of this word. He translates it with a spatial sense, to wander, because it can both refer to the many turns that Odysseus takes in his travels, and, as we'll soon see, to mental faculties. Just a note that Daniel Mendelssohn's translation, by pulling out the, I don't know why this is happening. Don't allow. There we go. Daniel Mendelssohn's translation really pulls out the fact that this adjective polus comes up multiple times in this passage. Many peoples, polon anthropon, many toils, pola algea, that clearly links the property of being polutropon with the traveling. Um, but being many turning actually is another way of describing an adaptable and shrewd intelligence that was greatly valued by ancient Greek societies. This is an intelligence known as metis elsewhere, and involves catching an opponent off guard through misdirection and deception. It's about being manifold and adaptable. It's about hiding in plain sight, which is just what Odysseus does here by never being mentioned by name. So the beginning of our proem brings our hero to the fore, in fact, by obscuring him, both without naming him and covering him up with all these manys. Strangely, the second half of the proem emphatically states his absence and his lack of responsibility for the death of his comrades. Note that it says, but he did not save his companions. Rather, their death was caused by their heedlessness. It's a little strange why the proem focuses so much on this moment, which occupies so little narrative time in the actual poem. But we might think of it as an invitation here, a moment to consider when Odysseus is absent, when he shifts or turns, what it means for the hero of our poem to be polutropos, and what it means for all of those he encounters. My hope is that we can think about that question as we follow him over the next several weeks, as well as all the other wonderful themes that we'll be able to explore. So now I can take a look at the document and see what questions, if any, have come in, or if we have time for them. Okay, great. Doesn't look like we have any right now. I don't know, Professor Kurke, if you had thought about potential themes for next week or questions for next week that you wanted to highlight. We can also share those.
Yeah, happily, Cecily, thank you. Since I'm going to be leading our next session, which is books 1 to 4, I love books 1 to 4, and I actually love the last 4 books as well. So I'm doing those. I mean, I love the books in the middle too, but I like 1 to 4. So having set up with the program, what I probably will focus on, and these are things to look out for in your reading, I want to think about Telemachus and why the poem starts with him. Why Telemachus? And why does the poem start like temporally precisely where it does? That turns out to be something about Telemachus and his sort of coming of age. And how does he know how to grow up and how to be a man when he's never had his father there as a model? So what is happening in books 1 to 4? Why is Athena leading him around? Right? And watch for sort of what's happening to Telemachus and how he's kind of evolving over those books. And then I have to say that we're going to have to spend a lot of time talking about Helen and Menelaus in book 4, when Telemachus with his sidekick, Pisistratus, the son of Nestor, arrive at Sparta and get hosted by Menelaus and Helen. These are amazing sequences. I just love the figure of Helen in both the Iliad and the Odyssey, but especially watch carefully the interactions between Helen and Menelaus and the ambiguities of those interactions. I mean, remember the entire Trojan War was fought for Helen. So Menelaus could take Helen back after 10 years of war, and now they're just happily kind of ensconced in Sparta. But like, what kind of marriage is that? So I want you to pay close attention to like all their interactions, Helen and Menelaus, and especially the 2 paired stories they have where they each tell a story ostensibly about Odysseus at Troy. Pay really close attention to those stories and what seems to be going on with them. So those are the things I really want to talk about next time. And you know, it's such a rich poem. There's so much to talk about. I'm just cherry picking of lots of amazing things, but those are some of my favorites.
Thanks for sharing those, Leslie. I'm seeing a question about how did bards get paid for performing? I actually do not know the answer for that. It's a super interesting question. Um, but
I mean, there are representations of rhapsodes in the poem, and it seems like it's kind of room and board. They get
mm,
food, they get a special cut of meat if they do a good performance. I think it's
mm,
kind of a barter economy, right? So they hang out in a place and they get fed, and maybe they get like a really nice cup or
yeah.
something, you know? I mean, all that gift exchange stuff that you see happening with guest friends, what's called xenia in Greek. Presumably that also applies to the bards, and they just kind of, the rhapsodes, they travel around. I don't know. It's just we have to guess from the internal representation of bards in the poem. But what's weird about the bards in the poem is that they don't travel around. They stay in one location. They're kind of like court poets.
Mhm.
You know, there's one in Ithaca, Phemius, and there's another one in Phaeacia, Demodocus, but they just stay in one place and they're taken care of for their performances. So lots of questions, but I think maybe we're done for tonight. What do you think, Cecily?
Think, and we'll pick up with all the breakout rooms and
Yeah, sorry, I'm not very good at reading chat
yeah.
while I'm in a Zoom, so I can't really deal with it. Sorry, I see that people have lots of specific questions, and maybe we can kind of address those as we go along, and people can.
Leslie, can I just and Cecily ask you guys, there are many people asking specifically why Mendelssohn's translation versus others, and I've relayed that because it was just published, and so people are likely not to have read it. But do you want to speak more on that?
Um, I don't know if I can speak to why his specifically over others, but I can speak to why I'm personally enjoying it. So he's actually using a very long line, metrical line, and that gives him a lot of freedom. And it captures, I think, I hope you could feel really well the sort of sound of a hexameter poem while still being able to keep up with the same line numbers as the Greek. Um, I think he also does a really excellent job of handling different registers. So, for instance, with Telemachus, who's Odysseus's son, he uses contractions, I'd like instead of I would like, and gives the gods more archaizing language. So I think it's just it finds really nice balances between being actually very understandable, but still close to the Greek in both its feel and what the Greek actually says. So I don't know if, yeah, Leslie, if you had other thoughts on that, but that was my impression.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm really enjoying it. I'm just reading it now for the first time. I like the rhythm of it. I like the sound of it. I like his use of his mix of like regular words and sort of, you know, good Anglo-Saxon
Mhm.
words and shifting of registers. I've taught the Odyssey now for 35 years, probably pretty much every year. And I've always used the Lattimore translation, which I like because it's very literal and the line numbers are the same. But in some ways, this one, yeah, it does feel fresher to me, and I think reads better, read aloud. And I guess I would say I haven't had much exposure to the Emily Wilson translation, which is a recent translation, which a lot of people like. And I've been told by a lot of colleagues that undergraduates like it. It's because it's easy to read. But she made a decision that she's going to translate this hexameter line, which is quite long, with iambic pentameter, which is a short line, but still keep the line numbers the same. And in order to do that, she actually cuts whole sections of the poem and doesn't translate them, which she also doesn't tell you. So, and it's kind of, it's trying to be kind of modern, and there are cocktail parties, and she translates Polytropon as a complicated man, which I feel ambivalent about because it's like his Facebook status or something. So I like the Mendelssohn because I think it's closer to the Greek and kind of captures that archaic quality it has, but it seems to me to be fresher and more readable than Latimer, especially to read aloud. I think, yeah, I would really, I second what Cecily said and encourage you to read aloud